Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our services, if we can please kindly turn off all cell phones or electronic devices, or please place them on silent. Thank you.
Adonai Madam Vatidrechu Benenosh Vachashvechu Adam Le'avedama Yamav Kitselove Baboke Atzitz Vichalav La'erev D'molevi Avish Tashev Enosh Adaka Vatomer Shuv Vene Adam. We gather today to remember our beloved Myrna. We gather with all our hearts, souls, and minds to acknowledge the many emotions that we are feeling. Who among us here has not passed through our own trials and bereavements? Some of us bear fresh wounds in our own hearts and therefore feel more keenly the kinship of sorrow with those who love and will always love Myrna the most. Others of us whose mourning is more remote still recall when a silent hug or a kiss or a word brought comfort to our sorrowing hearts. All things pass, all that lives must die, all that we prize is but lent to us. We are travelers on the same road that leads to the same end. So we gather today with many mixed emotions. Certainly the emotion of knowing that Myrna is no longer with us in this life, but with the knowledge that she is on her way in all God's speed to be with those who have gone before her in a reunification of love, but also with the knowledge that, as is tradition in Judaism, someone never really dies. Their memory is passed on, what we call the dor vador, from generation to generation. So I can foresee that in the homes of the grandchildren, in years to come, no rush, there will be little Myrnas running around, or little, whatever the male name of Myrna is, and they will be taught that they are named after someone so very special that we gather today, and they will be taught about their grandma, and they will be taught how we had words of love, of our highest compliment, that after speaking with the family and knowing that the highest compliment that you can ever call a Jewish woman, an Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor. So we gather with that knowledge today, knowing that, as King David wrote over 3,000 years ago, that God will walk us through the valley of the shadow of death. King David never wrote that you will be left in that valley, that one day you shall wake up. And all that will be left in your hearts and souls are those joy-filled, those happy, those pride-filled memories of Myrna, and those will be the ones on that day that will last forever, and those will be the memories that will be passed down to children in this family that shall be born in the future, that will have the honor and the privilege of being named after Mom, being named after Myrna. So if you know the traditional words of the 23rd Psalm, we say them from our hearts together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemy. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We begin those words that and memories that will be passed down. L'Ador Vador. We begin those words with David.
When I was a teenager, my mom's friends would often say that I was just like her. At the time, I found that embarrassing. As I grew wiser, I realized they may have been onto something. I wanted to be more like Christian Slater and pump up the volume, John Cusack, Keanu Reeves maybe. Actually, still wouldn't mind being like Keanu Reeves. But as I thought about her and her life, she was married to our dad for nearly 53 years. She was there by his side, traveling, building a family, through good times and tough times, raising my brother and me. When we were growing up, my dad was the loud voice in the room, the dominant personality. Anyone who's in here knows that to be true. But my mom, she had the quiet strength that kept our family going. The whole time that I thought my father was in charge, guess what? It was my mom all along. My mom was fiercely loyal to her friends and stayed with them not for years, but for decades. There are people here today who were friends with my mom for 50, 60, even 70 years. Think about that. They traveled together, raised families together, went on adventures together, and they talked, and they talked, and they talked, and they talked. And they faced loss together. And why did they stay friends with her for so long? She was funny, generous, and kind, and most of all, she was selfless. She loved you all. One of my mom's oldest and closest friends said to me this week, "Friends are the family you choose." Such words of wisdom, and so true of my mom. And now I have my own friends here in this room today who go back with me 30, 40 years, and they are here supporting me and my brother during this difficult time. There's a group of friends here, and you know who you are. My mom loved every single one of you. She always asked me about you. She was so happy when she saw you guys. She taught me how important friends are to get through the tough times and enjoy the good ones. Just like my mom, I love books, movies, and music. She introduced me to Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing when I was in elementary school. Goodbye Columbus in high school. She showed me great movies like The Graduate and bought me my first CD, Led Zeppelin II. She showed me the quiet strength and impact of doing acts of kindness for other people just because it was the right thing to do. This was not always easy. When I was in Hebrew school at Temple Emmanuel, I told her that all the kids didn't like mean bus driver Edie. I said she was always yelling at us kids and that she was horrible. My mother looked at me and said, totally unacceptable. She went to Springdale Farms down the street from here and bought a pie for her, and she told me, you will bring this to Edie tomorrow. I was horrified. Everyone hated Edie. She said, trust me, you will do this. So I brought the pie to her, and the kids were laughing at me, and at first I wanted to crawl into a hole. And this is completely true. I saw Edie smile quite literally for the first time ever, and she had even had a little tear in her eye for a pie. And then I got it. That was my mom. That was our mom. She watched us play every Little League game, every rec basketball game. She made my brother and dad and me snacks when we were watching the Eagles games with us, even though, as her friend Joan, I told you I was going to use this quote, said to me, how am I going to watch Monday Night Football, and we all know the big game tomorrow, without her feedback, even though I knew she had no clue what was going on? How am I going to watch the final episode of The Golden Bachelor, Team Leslie, by the way, without discussing it with my mom? During our last conversation, she told me who was hooking up with who on some show called Below Deck, and she knew all about it. She bestowed on me my love of dogs and animals and the pleasure of discovering new restaurants. We just both loved a good story and good experience. I love the beach because of her. From our times in Long Beach Island when I was a kid with my Uncle Arnie and my cousins Bob and Don, who she adored and I looked up to so much and still do, to when she and my dad got a shore house and then a boat in Brigantine. This picture here with my mom and my dad, my brother and I were just talking to each other, a little side talk, and there they are with our golden retriever Blaze on the boat. It reminds me of some of the best times of our lives, of our family's life together. I loved every minute of it. My mom had amazing advice. She once said about finding a life partner, quote, find someone who sees something in you you don't even see in yourself. When I met Audrey, my mom knew she was the one for me. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I think everybody knows that. I'm impulsive, and she's, well, an actual evolved, rational human being. Way to go, Audrey. You'll have to tell me what it's like sometime. She loved that we were together and knew that Audrey would always look after her irrational and overly emotional son. When we told her that we were expecting our first child, a baby girl, I never saw my mom leap up from a chair more quickly. An athlete she was not. She was so happy to have a granddaughter. Faith and my mom had a special bond. They loved art and drawing and had what I refer to as sneaky ninja humor. When I said goodnight to Faith last night and saw she was creating some kind of picture on her iPad, it reminded me of my mom immediately. 3.5 years later, Jessica was born. They shared a love of animals. She hung on to every story about Jessica volunteering at Cedar Run Animal Hospital. And my mom absolutely listened to every detail I shared about Jessica feeding a deer, injured birds, squirrels, other animals. The list is very long. She also loved it when Jessica teased me, something she was very good at. And she enjoyed every line I told her. She just loved you guys so much. She loved the people she loved so completely. She remembered every detail of every person's life, and not just close friends. She would tell us every detail, and I mean every detail, about the backstory of her hairstylist, her Uber driver, her doctors, her doorman, everyone. She cared about people. She listened. When she taught kindergarten at Young Stars and at McCourt Shalom, she remembered the kids forever. Anytime we went to a diner, Chinese restaurant, post office, you name it, there would be someone who knew her and who she remembered, and somehow she knew every single detail about their lives. In a world that can be so indifferent, especially now, my mom cared. She cared more than any person I have ever known. So as we say goodbye, her spirit is very much alive, and I do take comfort in that. So now if anyone says to me that I am just like my mom, I will say I only hope I can be half of the person that she was. I promise I will continue your legacy, Mom. I will miss you forever, but you will always be with me.
If you had the honor and the privilege of knowing Myrna, she went by many names of love to you, whether it was a formal name, a family name, a nickname, a silly name. When we say the words, we will remember. Please say the name out loud that Myrna was known to you as specifically, the name that you will have the privilege and the blessing of calling her when you have the honor of thinking of her. Say that name out loud. In the rising of the sun and at its going down, we will remember. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we will remember. In the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we will remember. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we will remember. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we will remember. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we will remember. When we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember. When we are lost and sick at heart, we will remember. When we have joys we yearn to share, we will remember. So long as we live, she too will live, for she is now a part of us, as we will always remember. Howie.
So many thoughts continue to run through my head. As Mom would say, I'm completely facaded with racing thoughts of Bubba Misa as I attempt to find the right words. But enough mishigas. One of the hardest things in life is losing the ones we love. At funerals, we often hear a loved one speak about how special the person they lost was. I have no doubt in my mind that they were. However, my mom was also a special and rare human being. Everyone who knew her loved her, and with good reason. She had an incredible way of making a person feel like they were the most important person in the room when she would talk to them. She was so pleasant and charming and had this big, beautiful smile that was just infectious. She genuinely, wholeheartedly got joy out of hearing good news, regardless of how big or small, from any single one of her family or friends. She could literally take your peak level of happiness over some good news and amplify that excitement by 10. She was an incredible, loyal person and the sweetest person you've ever met. Mom absolutely adored animals, and especially dogs, which is why we had our little friend Cody here earlier. I know she would have really loved that. She would often volunteer at the animal orphanage just to be around all the animals and people. It has really hit me these last few days that the fact is my mom was my best friend. We spent a lot of time with just the two of us for a long time growing up, and she was always there for me. These last couple of years, I've stayed with her while she's been sick, and we only got closer and closer. I would even sit through TV shows I didn't even like, but let me tell you that God's going to get some serious Jewish mother guilt, yes, for eternity, for making her miss the finale of The Golden Bachelor. Mom was also one of the coolest people you'd ever meet. An incredibly special memory I have with her was when I surprised her with tickets to see The Who, one of her favorite bands, for her 60th birthday. She was 60 going on 20 that night. We had so much fun, but the best part was seeing how happy she was. She still has the concert shirt to this day and wore it all the time. My mother absolutely adored her family, and I can't express how much she loved and always talked about her grandchildren, Faith and Jessica. There's simply too much to say, too many thoughts to express, to put onto a piece of paper and say to all of you today. Mom, I already miss you like crazy, and I'm so grateful to have had you in my life. I love you and you will forever be in my heart.
And to the family, you have already started, no doubt, to fill out all these forms as simply must be done for many different reasons. And you will continue to fill out all these papers and forms on behalf of Mom. And on all the forms will be the date of her birth. Many of the forms after the birth date will be a little dash. And after the dash will be the date of her passing. Certainly what's important is to remember her birthday, so each and every year to honor her on her heavenly birthday. And certainly in Judaism, it's tremendously important as a tradition and custom to light the yurtzeit, the remembrance candle, on the anniversary of her death. But even more important than those two bookend dates is that little dash in between. For that dash is a symbol of why all of us gather together with love in our hearts, souls, and minds. For Myrna, that little dash is a symbol of so much love received. And certainly, as we see and hear today, so much love given. So as you continue to fill out all these different forms, which undoubtedly must be completed, certainly look at the two dates at the beginning and the end of a life. But even more importantly, look at that dash. And when you do, know that dash is a symbol of a life well lived. Dr. Arnie.
This is not where I shine. It's my intention in this speech to provide insight into the first segment of Myrna's life, how it all began. Let me preface this in saying, generally speaking, when someone dies, it seems, regardless of who they are, they're described in glowing accolades. So when I tell you Myrna was a person of pure goodness, loving, sweet, kind, caring, interesting, and always interested, this is the truth. Let me take you back for a moment. Before I was born, my mother, after an easy, normal pregnancy, delivered a girl, sadly stillborn, occurred during delivery. The worst horror imaginable. Now speed ahead to this picture. My father, who was very religious, and I, seated together on Yom Kippur in the Orthodox synagogue we belonged to. Unbeknown to me, my mother was in labor in the hospital. She always chose to be asleep for delivery. My father kept checking with the hospital and suddenly told me to stay with our relatives. Mommy is having the baby. It may seem odd to you why he was in a synagogue while she was in labor, but knowing my father, he felt if he prayed, everything would turn out okay. It's a blur for me, but he returned jubilant. He said to me, "You have a baby sister." I had often been told that I was like the baby from hell, always crying, especially if anyone tried to look in the carriage to see me. With that in mind, I expected Myrna to be exactly like that. I was so wrong. It was a few days later my parents came home, both beaming with this bundle. They asked me to hold her. I was very apprehensive, expecting her to cry. Instead, this blue-eyed, bald baby looked at me so happy, and my heart melted. I was in love. She continued to be the easiest baby imaginable, always giggling and cooing. Ultimately, she went happily to school. One day, the teacher told the students to bring Valentines ahead, and they would be distributed on Valentine's Day. A list of her classmates was obtained, and Myrna went to school with Valentines for all of them. She came home looking dismayed despite a bag full of Valentines. It seemed that she was popular and received a large number, but others only got 5 or 6 of them. It broke her heart to see that. She had 9 carefree lives, but that changed. My father passed away after a lengthy illness. My mother never told Myrna what was coming, so she was always cuddled up to him until the very end. He just adored her. My mother felt it would be too traumatic for her to see my dad in an open casket, which remained open throughout the service. So she had Myrna stay with a neighbor and not attend. It was well intended, but I'm sure damaging. I was told by many that age 15, I was to be a father to Myrna, who was age 9. I took it to heart and tried to fill the void. Because of that, she sought my advice throughout her life. Everyone always told me how pretty Myrna was. And they would look at me and say, "You do have a resemblance." At an early age, my mom had wanted everyone to call Myrna by her full name, Myrna Leah. That never happened, so my mother came up with her new name, Myrna My Gutta. Myrna lived up to that easily. Even as a teenager, she was never moody. At age 16, Myrna was coming out of a kind of awkward stage, not as confident. At this time, I brought 17-year-old Jill into her life. Myrna was enthralled. Jill was vivacious, outgoing, and fun, and didn't seem ruled by shoulds like Myrna seemed to be. They bonded, and I was so happy. Myrna, at a later date, said, "Jill, I don't know how she did it, but she did unclod you." Yes, Myrna, the sweetest person in the world, knew I was a dork. In later years, she met Lynn, and although they didn't have as much time together, they cared about each other, both describing each other as being so nice. That Jill and Lynn are both here today speaks volumes about who Myrna was and also who they are. Jill and I married and got to meet boys Myrna dated. When she met Gary, she was smitten. He was outgoing, funny, and clearly in love with her. Just 3 weeks before their wedding, Gary lost his job. My mother was concerned. Myrna was not. She said that Gary is smart and driven to do well, and all would be fine. Myrna was right. He was to be very successful, and they were to have a good life. I'll leave you there. All of you here who got to share life with Myrna were blessed as I was. We all remember people for a different reason, maybe a laugh, a unique perspective, a story shared, mostly, in this case, a life well lived, and honor Myrna well loved.
For those who would like to give from your heart, in the name of Myrna, may give to the Cedar Run Wildlife Refuge. Straight from this service is the burial at Locustwood. Straight from Locustwood, if you would like to attend and pay your respects for Myrna, you may go back to the home of David and Audrey. That's at 2 Hilltop Drive. 2 Hilltop Drive in Cherry Hill. From after Locustwood until 6 o'clock today. 6. If you are able to, we rise for the prayer of our departed, the El Malay Rachamim. Until 2 o'clock today. El Malay Rachamim Shochein Bamromimim Hamitzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Ashchirina Im Kedoshim Eturim Gezerah Rakia Mazirim Et Nishmat Mashkaleya Bat David and Mary Shalach Leolama Barachamim Yasreya B'Seitze Kinafab Leolamim Vitzra Achaim and Nishmata Adonai Nacharata V'tzanu ach b'shalom al mishkava v'no more. Amen. Once again, in the space provided, please say the name that Myrna will forever be known to you as. In your heart, compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest into your sheltering presence of who has entered eternity, O God of mercy. Let her find refuge in your eternal presence, and let her soul be bound up in the bonds of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace, and let us all say, you may be seated.